10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 393. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 393 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Today we do our tune of the month, and we all know what that's going to be. We're going to be continuing with Sweet Sue, but I've prepared an etude for you. We're going to talk through that a little bit, go over the chord changes one more time, and then talk about where you can go from here with this tune and tunes like it. So we've been talking about the 32-bar form of Sweet Sue. We've talked about how simple the A sections are. We've talked about just using one simple device to play over those A sections. We've talked about learning the melody by ear, learning the words, actually being able to sing the tune. And then we've also talked about basically a voice leading approach to the bridge and, playing with some motives over the bridge. And that kind of all culminates in today's episode. So let's go over the form of Sweet Sue just real quick so that we understand the entire thing and we get a little bit of a refresher before I start to talk about sort of what I was thinking about when I wrote this etude. Okay, so first of all, we know that the tune is in concert F major. And remember, we want to remember that the A sections are super, super simple. All it is 2, 5, 2, 5, and then 1. And that lasts for 4 bars. And then it does it again. And you should be hearing that melody in your head if you've studied this tune over the course of the month. When I play that melody should just pop right into your head. You should be singing along with it, whistling along with it, humming along with it. It's a mark of a great melody is that you just instantly hear it and you can't help but try to play it or sing it. Okay, so then we get to the bridge, and this is the part where there's a little bit more harmonic movement happening. So what we see that concert F major 6 chord, it turns into an F7. So our brain goes, oh, we're about to modulate to the 4, but remember, that's not actually what happens. When we get to that F7 chord, we start descending by half steps, down to E7, down to E flat 7, down to D7, which is actually the 5 of G minor, where it goes for 2 bars. And then we go to the minor 4 of the home key. So we've got B flat minor 6, which is such a nice chord movement. You've heard me say that before. So the bridge. Then we go back to the A. And that's it. A very, very simple tune. And that's one of the things that we've been sort of espousing throughout the month is that you should approach this in a pretty simple way because there are certain tunes where using all of our bebop stuff is not going to work super well in a lot of the places. And to tell you the truth, I had to learn this the hard way. So back about 10 years ago, I got introduced to playing, for lack of a better term, trad jazz, early jazz. I'm talking about the music from like the beginning of jazz, 1920s through about the 1940s. And being a young, recently graduated jazz school person, I approached it like anybody would in that situation where I wanted to play the hippest stuff, the most out stuff. I wanted to play all this angular modern music, and it didn't work. And to be very frank with you, I got spoken to very harshly by some of the older musicians that played this music. And at first, it was a little bit rough. It was like, oh, well, I'm just kind of, playing stuff that's too hip for these people. And then with age comes wisdom. I realized that no, I wasn't actually. I was just being totally inappropriate. And I wasn't playing musical things over the style of music that I was playing. So think about it this way. If you got hired by a wedding band and you were playing all, top 40 hits at weddings, but you were trying to play like Charlie Parker, that wedding band would probably not hire you again. So it's the exact same thing with a tune like this. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't find your own voice over this. I want all of you to do that. But we do have to play to the tune. And if we choose to play these old tunes, we should at least investigate how the people that made these tunes popular, that wrote these tunes, that recorded them, how they played. It just makes sense, right? We all know that jazz is a music where we have to study the history, and that will sort of inform the way that we play over things. It's no different with this kind of music. Remember, jazz is not only a music, it's a tradition, right? And it's a very important cultural tradition. So we do have to kind of nod to that tradition before we can innovate. And I don't know anybody that is known as an innovator that hasn't studied the tradition deeply. Okay. So that's just my little soapbox rant about this music and why I'm approaching it in the way that I am. So if we pull up the etude from this week, then we're going to notice that there's a lot of that happening. What you're going to notice is that there's not any, searing bebop lines. And this is largely based off of using a lot of space, using some simple phrases that swing and that approach it like somebody would when they recorded this tune in, the 1920s and 1930s. And just to continue on this point, I get a lot of questions from students and people who follow me of like, how do I free myself up and sound more musical? And I think what I just mentioned is the way to do that. Pick some songs that don't have this insane harmonic landscape that takes all of your brain power to keep up with, and dedicate a portion of your practice time to playing over a tune like Sweet Sue, where you can just think about phrasing, where you can just think about your sense of swing, where you can just think about playing something super melodic without having to consider the chord changes as much. Because during the A sections, we've already established the fact that we really don't have to think about any chord changes at all. We could just focus on those intangibles. So you will notice in the etude that the A sections are pretty simple. And for the most part, they are just using that 6-note scale that I presented to you in part two of this series, right? So you're going to notice that that's reflected in what I've written for you. Now, over the bridge, I am trying to use some of that sequencing, some of that motivic playing, but actually in the entire thing, I'm really trying to do stuff with motives. So what I want you to do is I would like you to obviously just learn how to play this, go through it. You could even learn it by ear if you wanted to, but feel free to read the sheet if you want to do that. And I want you to go through, learn how to play it first. Okay, get familiar with it. And there's a couple of things that I think would be really beneficial for you on this. The first one would be to play it along with me, because one thing that you will notice is that I have not provided you with any type of articulation markings in this etude. And that's for the simple fact that I'd rather have you pick that up by ear. And it's just going to kind of force you to use your ear. So that would be the thing, like sort of study how I play it. I'm not the greatest in the world, obviously, but I have studied this music a lot. And I feel like my stylistic approach to it is, decent. So use the recording as an advantage to you and learn the articulations, the note length, the style from the actual recording, from the demonstration recording. Okay. Now, the second thing I would like you to do is I'd like you to go through after you know the etude, and I'd like you to pick out a couple of things that you really like. Hopefully, you like some of it, but go through, pick out some of the things that you really like, and try to figure out what makes them tick. All right. there's going to be different spots for everybody. Some people will like the first A section in the first chorus. Some people will really dig the end of it. There is like a progression of how I wrote this. I tried to do some different things in different sections. Tried to build the solo, have some kind of arc to it. But, go through, choose a couple things, think about those things. What am I doing? What am I thinking? And then finally, sort of the ultimate thing is, how can I use this in my own practice time? How can I take what I'm hearing and seeing and maybe incorporate it into my own playing? Okay, so that's kind of the order of events that I would like you to do with this. Let's listen to the etude. All right, so there you have it. There's your etude. Remember, you can get that by becoming a Patreon member. That's how to support this podcast. We don't do any advertisements or anything like that on the show. We just rely on listeners to support us in the form of a small monthly donation. For that donation, you do get a copy of everything that we do. I'm including backing tracks, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to find out more and support the show and get all those things in return, you can go to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, and get yourself signed up today. You'll get instant access to everything that we've ever done. All of our back episodes are over there. So if you're looking for some jazz education materials, that's the place to do it. So again, 10-minute jazz lesson, click on one of the Patreon banners or go to patreon.com and search for the 10-minute jazz lesson podcast and you'll be able to find all that stuff. Okay, so that's it for this series. We will see you next week. We'll start something new. I've heard from a lot of you that you like these sort of tune approaches to series, so we're going to continue with that. We'll choose another jazz standard, maybe something a little bit more modern this time, and we'll go through it and we'll talk some strategy over it so that you can come out of the month sort of knowing what you're doing over another tune. Okay. Hope you're all staying safe and healthy out there. Let me know if you have any questions. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.